Poor Unfortunate Souls by Serena Valentino. Prologue. A dark gray mist followed Ursula like creeping tentacles as she made her way through the seemingly abandoned town of Ipswich. Ursula's laugh echoed through the boarded up cottages, their pitiful denizens huddled within, terrified of the vengeful sea goddess who had descended upon them like a waking nightmare. She had altered herself into her human form for her excursion and used her magic to control the mists, creating long, menacing tentacles for herself that curled around and trailed behind her, blighting everything they touched. She left a path of destruction in her wake, black like oil and putrefying. She moved toward the main square and stood beneath the clock tower. Her tentacles assaulted it, turning the pillar into a wide black obelisk that might have been used for some more sinister purposes than keeping time. Hate. Her magic was infused with it, and in that hate was a deep, penetrating sorrow. Those humans had taken from her the only person who had loved her, and she was going to make them suffer. She cast her ghostly appendages toward the sea, calling forth her dark minions, sirens. There was a hideous mix of human and sea creature. These These were a hideous mix of human and sea creature, like something conjured by the most deranged visionary mind. Pale hauntings behind with dark smoldering pits for eyes emerged from the sea. Wide grinning mouths gnashing endless rows of sharp yellow teeth. Their skin was like a thin, translucent milk, and through it one could see their deep blue veins and grotesque endoskeletons. Though their song caused humans to tremble and their ears to bleed, it was beautiful to Ursula. She found it winsome, intoxicating, and overwhelmingly beautiful. Its haunting melody compelled those vile humans to emerge from their boarded dwellings, drawn to siren song and spellbound by their call. How weak they are, she thought. She grinned at the befogged looks on their wretched faces and laughed at their impending doom. They walked on, blind to their own destruction, powerless to stop it, and powerless to save their own lives as blood dripped from their ears and poured from their mouths. They were choking on it, sputtering, unable to scream at the horrors around them. Ursula thought it was the most beautiful and thrilling thing she had ever beheld. If the sea witch had let the sirens' chorus continue, it would have brought death to the humans. But letting them die was too easy, wasn't it? She wanted to see their terror and watch them suffer. She wanted them to become the thing they feared and hated most. She wanted them to show their loathsomeness. As her hate penetrated Ipswich, she was surrounded by wrecked lands as far as she could see. She stood within the landscape, like a shining thing of beauty among the ruin, her face pale from rage, her eyes mournful but brimming with revenge, her heart full of hate, divine hatred. That's what it was. Divine. She felt truly alive for the first time. She felt no pity for them as she watched them bleed. There was no hesitation on Ursula's part, and she had no time for pleading or crying. They had been silenced by the song of the sirens. They stood before her, sickly and foul, watching in silent horror as Ursula led them to their destruction. The power of the old gods, I call you to me, the deep ones, to claim these humans for the sea. With this spell, the humans fell to the ground, convulsing, struggling for air. They looked around, gasping, and saw their fellow villagers transform into horrific sea creatures. Now they were forever bound to Ursula, to do her bidding, forever inhuman, forever monstrous and vile. Ursula's laugh swelled from her gut and sounded throughout the lands, reaching the ears of every witch in the many kingdoms. It sent a shiver through even the most powerful among them. Dark and light, because they felt the weight of this. They knew the power of hate infused magic and the destruction it could bring. The dark gray mist curled around Ursula as she watched the terrified humans struggle against their transformations, their silent screams making the scene more beautiful to her. Don't fight it, ha 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 ha, my darlings, she laughed. Or perhaps you should. It hurts more to struggle. This was far more rewarding than she had imagined. It was splendid. This hate, this utter destruction. It was glorious. Ursula's laugh thundered as she stepped into the encroaching waves at the shore, encouraging all her new creatures to journey into places unknown to them, dark places they had been too frightened even to contemplate, places they had only visited in their nightmares or anxious, fevered daydreams. The creatures were her nows, servants. She would use them at her will and to their torment. As the waves touched her human feet, she slowly transformed. It seemed the creature within her had no choice other than to burst forth from the human flesh, desperate to be seen and aching to be in the waves. She was growing to Levithian proportions now, towering over her terrified minions, bawling with laughter at their plight. Then, unexpectedly, a figure emerged from the water, like the Flying Dutchman, breaking the silence. Stop this lunacy at once! The voice was louder than the crashing waves. Whereas Ursula seemed nothing but darkness, he appeared like shining light. He was beautiful, and seemingly too good. Those were traits she found all too prevalent in males of higher rank in those lands. She had no idea who that minor god might be, but she already knew she didn't like him. Who are you to command me? She asked, snapping her head to the right to get a better look at this mockery of the gods. Did you not call upon the old gods? I have answered. I called for help, not interference. Look around you. Look what you've done to this land. Everything is scorched with your hatred. It is blistering as the lands of the old queen. Don't take her path, little sister. Come home with me, where you belong. Ursula was silent, perplexed. Hear me, sister. See that necklace you are wearing? It was a gift from our father. We thought you were lost to us forever. I hoped one day you would come to know your power and call upon me, but I did not expect to find this. Her face was screwed up with a look of disgust as she surveyed the destruction Ursula had wrought. You know nothing of my life. I was left here alone with these humans who feared and hated me. You have no idea what I have suffered. Ursula, do you truly not remember me? I am your brother, Triton. Ursula looked at Triton, furious and confused, unable to place him. I'm sorry, Ursula. It's time I brought you home. Chapter 1. The Sea Witch. It had been many years since Ursula had seen her dear friends, the sister witches. Not since right after her exile from Triton's court had she paid them a visit. There was so much to catch up on, and as she made her way, she saw light dancing across the rippling water, and she knew what at last reaching the surface. She could always make out the shadowy images of her three sisters standing on the shore, waiting for her arrival. It has been rather a long time, she thought, and decided she might as well make a grand entrance. With a great spectacle, she felt herself growing, her tentacles elongating, a sensation that always made her feel like the dominant force of the sea that she was. I haven't felt this power within me for ages. She had taken down massive ships in that form, splintering them, casting their remains deep in her dark, foreboding realm. She saw the looks of astonishment in the odd sister's bulging eyes as she rose out of the water to towering heights. The trio of sister witches, Lucindia, Ruby, and Martha, looked small, standing on the wet black rocks and shivering in the cold. Ursula thought the sisters possessed a grotesque beauty, with their two large eyes, tiny mouths, and pale, haunting faces that were framed far too perfectly by their raven ringlets. She found them beautiful, even if the mist clinging to the feathers in their hair made them look like frightened, soggy, flightless birds. One wouldn't know if by their frightful state, Ursula mused, but those witches were the things of legends. They were cousins to the old king, the father of the queen called Snow White. They were great benefactors to the dark fairy and her sleeping princess. Though Ursula would never say so aloud, she owed her newly regained power to the odd sisters. They had returned her necklace, although she considered it was a fair exchange for something their little sister had desperately wanted. Lucinda gasped as water spilled from Ursula's massive form onto the witches' awestruck faces, their ears splitting with Ursula's thunderous laughter and booming voice. I'm so happy to see you, sisters. It's been far too long. The sea witch leaned down to be at eye level with the odd sisters. They were really quite striking, she thought, but too much beauty without the proper proportions. Ursula's arms were outstretched, ready to embrace them. The sisters scuttled tentatively as one into Ursula's embrace, which eased their concern and relaxed them with the fact that Ursula was not cross with them. I see you're wearing our gift, said the sisters in unison, spotting the golden seashell necklace around her neck. All were worried Ursula would be enraged if she ever learned it had been stashed away in their pantry, half forgotten all that time. Ursula laughed, this time at the sound of the sister's scratchy voice and at the state of the dropping feathers in their pitch black hair. Thank you, my dear friends. You will have to tell me how you got it back from my brother at some point. Or was it Circe? I didn't ask her when she brought it to me. And where is Circe? I'm surprised she isn't with you. Circe. The mention of her name was like knives being plunged into the odd sister's heart. She had been a source of heartbreak for them, the reason Lucinda had called on Ursula for help. Circe was the reason the odd sisters cried endlessly, vainly crying her name into the darkness, hoping she would at last return on account of their pleas for forgiveness. Circe hadn't answered her sisters' call, so they summoned the sea witch for help. Of course, Ursula would want something in return. She always did. She was the maker of deals. Lucinda spoke first. Circe, our beloved has gone far from us. Her deep red satin gown was stained with tears, and like her sisters, her eyes were smudged with black coal makeup that had streamed down her cheeks from long hours of crying. She's so angry with us. She's ventured where our magic cannot follow, continued Ruby. Martha's sobs were almost too violent for her to speak. That's why that's why we've come to you, Ursula. We want our little sister again. Ursula asked the obvious question. Have you tried to summon her, dears? In one of your many enchanted mirrors? The sisters broke down crying again. She must have done a spell when she left that kept us from summoning her. Martha's sad, bulging eyes, which were so much like her sisters, were filled with grief and fear. Ursula could not tell they were truly afraid. She couldn't recall ever seeing her friends in such a state, so full of regret and so grief stricken. I promise you, Martha, I will help you find Circe. I promise each of you, my dearies, you will see your little sister again. Then Ursula smiled, one of her magnificent grins, which slowly transformed into something a bit more mundane as she used her magic to assume human form and took the sobbing Martha into her hands. She knew the sisters would give anything to see Circe again, as much as she wanted to help them, and of course she would be happy to do so. She just so happened to be in the need of the odd sisters' special brand of magic and return for her favor.